But I'm happy to close out this Batty Thursday with the host of the Locked On Kings podcast. And, of course, a broadcaster over at ABC 10, our man Matt George. Matt, appreciate you, my friend.
Kenny Caraway ducking me like Lonzo Ball ducks De'Aaron Fox, man.
Cold world.
I can't handle it.
Cold world, man. Cold world.
I guess he's got like a family and a baby or whatever.
Look, you didn't miss a hit because you had a baby.
Of course not. I brought the baby onto the hit.
That's true. You did that on several occasions, and every once in a while I can catch young Artie crying in the background of the Locked On Kings podcast.
Yep.
Which, by the way, it's a bit dated, and that's the kind of the tough part about on-demand content. I didn't get to talk to you following it. I probably should have sent you a note. I really like the podcast following the Philadelphia game. The podcast really centered on how the Kings offense has gotten lost a little bit on this road trip. And that's not really applicable to what we saw last night. But it's just, I strongly encourage, and I've seen people post their Spotify year-end results. And I know a lot of people who listen to us are listening to Locked On Kings. But if there's some reason you're not on Locked On Kings yet, that's a podcast you really need to subscribe to.
Well, I appreciate that, D-Lo. And let me say something to that, too, is like I'm seeing all these people posting these Spotify raps, and it's some order or some combination of D-Lo and KC, of Locked On Kings, of Return of the Roar, Kings Pulse, Kings Beat. Like there's so much great Kings and Deuce and Mo. Like there's so many great Kings and sports-related content here in Sacramento. And I think it's what's really unique about this market is how we can all coexist together and put together a great product and do our best to support one another too, often appearing on each other's shows. So I like to, I mean, being a part of it, obviously I'm a little biased, but it feels like in some ways like a renaissance of content and sports related content here in Sacramento. And I think what we were just talking about, the growth of like Sac State football and basketball, UC Davis football and basketball, it goes beyond just the Sacramento Kings, who are finally getting good too. Like it feels like a really, really good time right now to be a Sacramento sports fan.
It does, man. And I found myself getting a little frustrated a minute ago talking to Kenny, which is nothing new, but Kenny didn't do anything to frustrate me. As our conversation went on, I got more frustrated talking about Domantas Sabonis. And I realized, and it's a great hook, and I love it. And I've said this a million times. I have a pretty small family. They live in the Bay Area. They're coming here December 23rd to see the beam.
Yep.
They're excited to see the Kings and go to the Golden One Center. They want to see that beam. The beam is a really cool talking point. It's a really great way to hook people who haven't been paying attention to the Kings for a long time. But we're off that now, or we should be. You need to be talking about guys like Domantas Sabonis and what he's doing for this team, because my argument moments ago, Matt, was Sabonis is an all-star. And we went through different bigs who can make this in the West, not the Western Conference anymore, but who can make the all-star team. He is an all-star. And as we went through it, we realized it's actually relatively easy. He's an all-star.
Yeah, I think the beam caught everybody's attention, and Domantas Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox specifically should keep that attention. I could also put Malik Monk into that conversation too. But I put out on Twitter last night, and I pinned it to my profile. Like I've never been more confident in saying that the Sacramento Kings will have an all-star this year. Like to me, it's an absolute no-brainer. Like the idea. If we get to even if a scenario, knock on wood, of the Sacramento Kings completely falling apart between now and the All-Star game itself, which I don't think is going to happen because the Kings are about to come home for 6 straight after hopefully handling business in Detroit. And then the schedule opens up pretty significantly in January. A lot of winnable games in January too. Like, regardless of the results of those games, what Domantas Sabonis is doing right now, not just numbers-wise, and I know a lot of people pay attention to numbers, and they see the rebounds, they see the assists, he flirts with a triple-double on a nightly basis, he's putting up like 20 points a game recently, he's shooting a ridiculously efficient, like he seems like every night it's like 7 of 10, 8 of 10, 8 of 11, like he's just uber efficient. And now his field goal attempts are still staying around that 9, 10, 11, 12 a game range, but his free throw attempts are going up, suggesting to me that he's being aggressive. He's just drawing fouls. And if you draw a foul and the shot doesn't go in, it doesn't count as a field goal. So he's still attempting a shot. He's just fouled in that situation. But yeah,
imagine how aggressive you have to be Domantas Sabonis to actually get a foul call.
I tweeted out last night as a joke, but it's also kind of true. Like if Mike Brown wants De'Aaron Fox to start getting some respect and get to the foul line, he just should have Domantas Sabonis guard him for a possession. Like, it doesn't matter if they're wearing the same jersey. Just Domantas go out there and hack De'Aaron while he's going up for a layup, and they'll actually blow the whistle and get De'Aaron on the line. But
that's better than our idea. We suggested they blade.
Sell it and blade.
De'Aaron couldn't get the call with the blood trickling down his cheek, down his temple yesterday. Maybe if Sabonis does the old Shawn Michaels, blade job across the forehead, they can get a call.
Well, hell, that won't even matter, because apparently seeing blood isn't enough for an NBA official to call a foul in the moment or actually pay attention to a obvious push off minutes later. And I'm sure we'll get into that. But like that, actually, screw it. We'll get into it now. Like that play, when I was talking about it on the pod last night, like I was laughing about it because like De'Aaron Fox, De'Aaron Fox is not that good of an actor. Like the man is not a stunt double. He flies 10 feet and slides across the ground. It's because he got shoved. It's not because he suddenly threw himself back and has that kind of control over his body. He's an athlete, don't get me wrong, but I don't think De'Aaron Fox can do that. But like what irritates me the most about that play is I mean, I can't really blame Van Vliet, because that's how he was playing the entire night. He was shoving and looking like a bull the entire night. So he just continued to do what he was doing, and the refs were letting him have it all night long. What pissed me off going back and watching that play is like the context behind it. Like you watch the clip, De'Aaron is pushed, literally slides past the official who doesn't even look at him. Now, one person could argue, oh, the official is looking at the play. He's keeping his eye on the play. Nah, the official is giving De'Aaron the cold shoulder. Why? Because that official is butthurt because both De'Aaron Fox and Mike Brown called him out on his BS earlier on in the game when they both had a valid point. And that's where I get frustrated, because it goes from just being bad at your job, or it goes from missing a call to intentionally not blowing the whistle and intentionally ignoring an obvious foul. Like, I don't need the last 2-minute report to tell me that was an obvious freaking foul. You're intentionally ignoring it because you're butthurt or you're angry at how De'Aaron Fox spoke to you earlier on in the game, or because you're just trying to prove. At that point, you're just being a stubborn ass. And for a position where I'm not pretending NBA officials have an easy job, I'm not pretending that the NBA officials deserve the abuse that they get on a nightly basis from players or fans or coaches, whatever. They don't deserve that. They're human beings, and I know they make mistakes. But admitting your mistake versus doubling and tripling down on that just to be a stubborn jerk, that's not what an impartial referee, with your job is literally to be impartial. That's not what a referee does. That part pissed me off.
And then knowing the 2-minute report was going to come out the next day and say, yeah, they missed that one. And it's, again, a call at the end of a Kings game that the officials missed. Clean as can be look right there for Fred Van Vliet. Thankfully, it didn't go in. The Kings were able to to walk away with the victory there, man. But what a mess that could have turned into. Matt, you mentioned the teams coming home. I mentioned the game against Washington on December 23rd. Not only are we going to be there, is my family going to be there, we want you to be there. We've got tickets for you right now. Caller number 3, 916-909-1320. We'll get you all set up. This particular pair of tickets brought to you by Matt George. Caller number 3, 916-909-1320. We'll send you to see the Sacramento Kings take on the Washington basketball team coming up December 23rd. You mentioned the Detroit game. That win last night was special for a variety of reasons. It felt like it was 5-on-8, but they got into, they've had a couple of bad games in a row against New York and Philadelphia, and they got into, I think it was a 15, 16-point deficit here that they didn't let get too far out of hand. And they fought, despite the fact they went entire quarters without going to the free throw line. They fought, they got themselves back in it, and they put themselves in a position to win that game at the end. And I feel like at some point, we're 27 games into this, Matt, we can dead that same old King stuff. We can dead the fear that these games are going to pile on top of each other and know that these are the ups and downs of an NBA season, but we as Kings fans just might not be used to the ups.
To me, last night's win was one of the more gritty Kings wins that I can remember in my entire time of covering the Kings, and certainly during this 16-year playoff drought. And what what stood out to me, I mean, all the outliers, all the reasons you listed of being down by 16 points, being on the road, Toronto being an extremely good and composed team. That's a very difficult place to play, like no matter who you are. But to me, it was and this is something that I give a lot of credit to Mike Brown and this entire Kings coaching staff, the adjustments that this team can make both from one game to another or in game is significantly better than I don't know any coach other than like Rick Adelman and his coaching staff that have made adjustments this quickly. And the team is receptive to those adjustments. Mark Jones, I thought, explained it or called it very well when he was calling the Kings and Knicks game. That game felt like it was being played in New York traffic. That's what he said. It was just so stop and go. And then the next game in Philadelphia, again, a lot of fouls in that game, stop and go. There was no flow. There was no rhythm to the game, and that drastically affects the Sacramento Kings. Drastically affects the Kings because the Kings are a team that, like we can see, when they get going, kind of everybody gets the touches, the ball starts moving, shots start falling, the team figures it out, gets on a little bit of a vibe, and that's where they're at their best. So I give credit to teams for slowing the Sacramento Kings down, but I know Sacramento has also struggled with physicality. Like teams that have been more physical with them, slowing them down into kind of a grinded out style. Sacramento has struggled with that at times this season. So they take on a Toronto Raptors team who tried to do that against the Kings. The Kings go down by 16 points. Domantas Sabonis didn't shy away from the physicality. The Kings, De'Aaron Fox went from taking almost half of his field goals from 3-point range in Philly to 8 of 23 shots were from 3, and the rest were amongst the teeth of the defense in the paint and things like De'Aaron was immediately trying to be more aggressive, attacking the basket, and that opens up opportunities for everybody else. The Kings immediately adjusted to the physicality, did not shy away from it, and used that physicality to create transition opportunities for them. I thought the fact that the Kings had over 30 fast break points in that game, and yet only forced 7 turnovers. That means every single time the Raptors missed, it was an outlet pass and the Kings were trying to run. They were saying, if we can't get 6 minutes of just good, solid, fluid basketball without whistles, then we're going to take advantage of the 5 seconds at the beginning of the shot clock when we can beat others down the floor. So they created that opportunity for themselves. Those are adjustments night in and night out that made, I think, last night's win so impressive.
Do you think and maybe this isn't the case of the season, maybe it's the case of the road trip, but you tell me, you talked about the New York game, Mark Jones using the line, I feel like it's being played in New York traffic. Do you think there's only so many things that they can control, but do you feel like they get sucked into playing the way that their opponent wants them to rather than the way that they want to?
I think the Philly game, I don't know. I think actually both of those games, maybe the New York game a little bit more than the Philly game, I could say that. It still felt like the Kings were trying to play their style and trying to get things going. They just, like the Kings really struggled to get within 20 points in both the Knicks and 76ers game. Like they were having a hard time putting together more than 5 or 6 points consecutively. And credit to Tom Thibodeau in the New York game. He was calling timeouts as soon as the Kings got anything going, and the New York Knicks were making adjustments. So I give credit to the Knicks. The 76ers game, on the other hand, was a big man, a very talented big man in Joel Embiid initiating contact, playing physical, and yet whoever's defending him wasn't allowed to play physical, so everybody got into foul trouble, and the 76ers, who were just dreadful to watch as a basketball team, period, were allowed to go and play the game that they play the best, which is getting to the foul line. I don't know if the Kings could have done anything differently other than, you know what, you're not going to get to the foul line. We're just going to step aside and give you layups so we can inbound the ball quickly and try and get some tempo that way. But I mean, I think the officiating definitely had an effect on both those games. I think it was the game plan of both those teams to slow Sacramento down. And then the Kings were also missing some open shots to where they couldn't really get anything going because good looks that were being created by Sabonis or Fox or good ball movement just weren't falling. We saw in the second and third quarters of the Raptors game last night, as soon as those shots started falling, Malik Monk started hitting. De'Aaron Fox was getting to the rim. Domantas Sabonis was effective in the pick and roll. As soon as one gets going, it's like we all eat type thing. You eat, we all eat in Sacramento.
I thought that was such a tone-setting performance for Terrence Davis. He got out there, he gets the late nod. I know they wanted to try to give Kevin Huerter a go last night. He gets the nod to start, and he comes out, firing from 3. He cools down a little bit. I think the team as a whole kind of cooled down, but there was already that feel, all right, they've got this 3-point falling already at a better rate. than they had in the last handful of games. Like, stick with that. And then along comes, Malik Monk, who having 3 20-point scorers last night in that win in a game that you won by 1 point. You needed everything that those guys had to offer.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Terrence Davis was fantastic, and then I thought everybody kind of answered the call. I was actually surprised with how little Terrence Davis played, like minutes wise, and that's also what stood out to me is second night of a back-to-back after De'Aaron played 29 minutes in Philly, and Domantas Sabonis played, I think, a little over 30 minutes in Philly. It's not like they played 15 minutes and then had the rest of the night off. On the second night of a back-to-back with De'Aaron, and it's just his second game back from an injury, you got 41 minutes out of him. You got 40 minutes out of Domantas Sabonis.
Which is kind of unusual, right? For those guys to crack the 40-minute threshold is unusual.
But that's what the Kings also needed to win. And that's why I loved the Mike Brown ejection so much, and I've seen a lot of people talking about this ejection, and it has a lot of built up from how the Kings have been officiated this year, and he finally popped and snapped. And I think that's true. But to me, the reason why Mike went from 0 to 100 really, really quick is I think Mike saw De'Aaron pick up his tech and said, oh, no. Like, my point guard's not getting thrown out. I'm going to get thrown out, because I think Mike Brown knew that if De'Aaron gets tossed out of that game, the Kings lose. Like, the Kings don't win that game without De'Aaron Fox on the floor. So Mike said, I can still get De'Aaron's message across. I can pick up my guy. I can have my guys back. I'll take the fine. I'll go sit and watch this game in the back. I got confidence in Jordy and the rest of my coaching staff that they can pull this out, and I'll keep my point guard on the floor, and hopefully he'll get a little better treatment. Now, of course, he really didn't for the remainder of the game. But, I thought that was tremendous leadership by Mike Brown to recognize, one, this is my opportunity to finally voice the frustrations that I've had building forever, and two, I think I need to do this to protect my guy. And that's, you talk about the respect that Mike Brown has in the league. It's little things like that, plus what stood out to me, D'Lo, and maybe this isn't surprising to a lot of people. Maybe this is pretty common in coaching circles. I don't know, because I'm not an NBA head coach or a basketball coach. But Jordy gets his first career win, right? And we see that video of the celebration in the locker room. Who's in the background during that celebration? It's Mike Brown. Just as happy as everybody else
is. Water on him just like everybody else is.
And does Mike Brown step up? Does Mike Brown get in the way? No. He lets Jordy address the team. He lets Jordy give the speech. He gave the keys to Jordy in that moment. That was Jordy's moment. He said, I got ejected. I did what I had to do. He got his win. I'm going to step aside and let my lead assistant handle this. Like, that to me speaks to everything that Mike Brown is. And that's why these players, these coaches, now these fans are such big fans of his.
Yeah, that moment really stood out for me too. We brought that up here, and there were actually a couple of moments that stood out to me, and they all center around the coaches. That was one of them. The fact that immediately following the game, Malik Monk on the broadcast and Domantas Sabonis first up in the press conference both said something along the lines of, we had to go out there and win that for Mike. And then as Sabonis is talking, he brings up a speech from Doug Christie, and all in this 1 point win after after a road trip that's not going its best, a game that was just a disaster. Your point guard is bleeding. You're frustrated. Your coach gets tossed. All in that moment, you come together, you get a win. Jordy gets his first win. You mentioned Mike Brown celebrating. Sabonis brings up Doug Christie. Malik brings up Mike Brown. And it's you turn the TV off last night, or you head to your Locked On Kings podcast and go, man, this is a close-knit unit. This is a group that is out for each other. And this is the first time in a very, very, very long time that something like that can be said.
And I'm sure there was already a pre-existing respect between this coaching staff and these players, but you can see how that respect has blossomed in such a short period of time. And it's easy to understand, especially from the player perspective. I got Mike Brown, who's so well respected as my head coach. His backup is Jordy Fernandez, has freaking Jay Triano, has Leandro Barbosa, who still looks like he could shoot or suit up and drop 20 on any given night. And he works hard. Like you talked about Domantas Sabonis getting beat up pregame. Typically, Barbosa bounces around and kind of helps with everybody's drills, and he puts a shot or a hand in shooters' faces like he's trying to make sure they don't get a good look, and he's also trying to pick their pockets. Like they play one-on-one before games start. There's a reason why those players are sweating. It's not just hot in that building; they're working, and Barbosa puts them through that. Doug Christie out there as well. Like this coaching staff, top to bottom, is so tremendously impressive that while I'm not saying I want Mike Brown to be ejected on any given night, I have more than enough faith in Jordy and the rest of that bench to handle their job. Everybody knows that what their roles are, top to bottom in that organization. That was something that Mike Brown preached in his introductory press conference. He said everybody needs to know their role. Everybody needs to be on the same page. That's how we change the culture of this organization. And it seems like everybody, top to bottom, has truly bought into that. It's even Monty McNair in the front office.
Ask you a Jordy question, a coaching question. I'm curious if you noticed this and what you thought of it. He went to Rashawn during the game, and we haven't seen a lot of Rashawn, and I think there's multiple different ways that you can look at this, but what did you think of Jordy going to Rashawn after he took over?
Like part of me was like, oh, this is different. This is the Jordy flair. But also at the same time, it's like, I don't think Jordy Fernandez was going, I got my opportunity. Now I'm going to change Mike Brown's rotation and show him what he should be doing. Like, I don't believe that was the situation at all. I think it was, maybe a little maybe a little matchup based. Like the Kings, Chimezie Metu wasn't bad necessarily, but that team is such a physical team that Metu, I don't remember much of what Metu did, which maybe was kind of the point. He wasn't really having that much of an impact. I think Alex Len could have been very valuable to the Kings last night if he was actually available to go. Yeah. So I'm okay with Rashawn Holmes getting some run. I'm a big believer in Rashawn Holmes still. Mm-hmm. I think he's having a really hard time finding how he fits. And the reality is maybe this Kings team just doesn't run the way or play the way that maximizes Rashawn's skill set. On one hand, I expect Rashawn to have the ability to adapt his game to make it work when he gets that opportunity. But at the same time, if you are a very specific archetype of a player who thrives in like pick and roll situations and thrive playing next to Tyrese Halliburton and thrive with that push shot, but you're now playing in an offense where the ball is primarily running through your center as a distributor in the high post. Yeah, I understand those are very different things and maybe difficult for a player who doesn't necessarily have that skill set, who wants to play in a completely different way. So if Rashawn is ready to go, and if whoever the coach is thinks that Rashawn can give them a boost, I have full faith in them. And I think Rashawn, what I love the most is that picture that we saw of the Beam team after the win. And there's Rashawn in the background with a big smile on his face. And there's no way, I'm sure Rashawn is not happy with his scenario. He's not happy with this situation, but you wouldn't know it by the way he interacts with his guys. We haven't heard anything. We haven't seen any complaints, which is very different from years past. So I will always support Rashawn getting minutes.
It stood out to me right away that Rashawn was out there. I thought, oh, all right, little Jordy call. This is cool. It's different. And then I realized, looking back at the Philly game, he played minutes in Philly. Mark Jones, I think, uses the line, there's no such thing as garbage minutes in the NBA. They mean something to somebody. Rashawn played really, really well in those minutes, and it drew me back to Chimezie Metu against Golden State. Golden State up big, Chimezie Metu a part of the run that helps, get that game closer. But Metu had some DNPs there at that point. And I wonder if now after that Philly game, if it was like, hey, we've gotten a little look at Rashawn. And I don't mean to frame it if I am. Like it's not like he played big minutes yesterday. He played a handful. He played like 3. Chimezie Metu played 4. Like there wasn't minutes for those guys yesterday. But I did think maybe he showed this staff something, and it was a conversation they were having well before the game about what Rashawn Holmes had did against Philadelphia. You mentioned the second night of a back-to-back. Hey, maybe there's a situation where we could use him a little bit more moving forward.
And I still do believe that Rashawn is a massive asset to have on your bench that you can point to and go to in the same way that KZ Okpala is. Now, Rashawn has shown more at the NBA level than KZ Okpala has, but I have a specialist in KZ Okpala when I need a lockdown defender out there. Maybe there's an offensive drop-off, but when I need to get a stop, I need some length. KZ, you're my ace. Get in there. So Rashawn Holmes, if I need energy, if I need fast break verticality, if I need a lob threat, even though he hasn't shown that nearly as much as Chimezie Metu has, which is a bit perplexing to me. Rashawn is available, and he's more than capable. And I know largely because of Rashawn's contract that there wasn't much of a market for him trade wise during this offseason. I don't know if that's going to change or not before this NBA trade deadline, but I guarantee you 29 other teams in the NBA could use a player like Rashawn Holmes. Rashawn does provide value. He does have value. The seasons that he put in Sacramento to earn that starting spot and to get that contract that he earned weren't just flukes, weren't just misnomers. Like, that is who Rashawn Holmes is. Maybe he is just a very specialist player that needs the right system and needs the right guys around him to maximize himself. And if that's who he is, welcome to the NBA. There are a ton of role players who are that exact same way, especially big men. So there's a place for him in the league. And I trust that the overall collective basketball IQ and experience of that coaching staff to find out when, if at all, to use Rashawn effectively.
One player I do not think we have mentioned one single time today, I honest to goodness don't even know if we've said his name, is Keegan Murray.
Yep.
Keegan did not have a big scoring output last night, but I thought he had moments where he was really impactful. I thought the few plays that he made were really, really timely. He hit a three that they desperately needed in the fourth quarter, and he's a guy who I think, despite this, those two games not going well, I think he's a guy who's kind of regained his form, kind of regained his balance a little bit here, and is playing really well. And on nights that he's not shooting well or scoring a lot, he finds ways to be really, really effective. And I thought he did that last night.
I pointed this out on my pod. Keegan stays making really important plays in big or in important situations, like fourth quarter plays. He just makes, whether it's a big shot when the Kings need it, or you talked about that three that came at the end of a really nice stretch for him. I think he had a layup. Then the next possession down the floor, I think they were trying to get the ball in the paint to, I want to say it was Pascal Siakam, and he got involved and knocked that ball away and was credited with a steal, and then had the three as kind of the final part of that trifecta. Overall, 10 points, not the best shooting night for him, shot under 50% or 40%. Like, it's not a night with the sexiest stat line that's going to get him a lot of run. But what that says to me is that this rookie is a gamer. Like, he knows when he can make an impact and how he can make an impact. And there's a reason why he is consistently on the floor for this team, even on a night where he's not putting up big numbers and hitting a lot of shots, or is even that big of a threat to opposing defenses. It doesn't matter. Keegan Murray is out there because he's a smart player and he knows how to make an impact in the little opportunities when he needs to. And those little things that he does, forcing that one turnover that leads to a fast break opportunity that puts the Kings up by 5 instead of by 3. Like, those little things add up to where you pull off a 1-point victory on the road against a playoff team in the Eastern Conference. So, like, Keegan, I mean, could he be doing more to impress me? Absolutely. And I'm not just trying to pretend that everything's okay when he doesn't have great shooting nights. And then I would love for him to have 16-point nights instead of 10-point nights like he did last night. But he still finds ways to be impactful outside of the box score. And typically you don't see rookies do that this early on in their careers, even if he's an older rookie.
Yeah, here's the thing, though. Everything is okay if he doesn't score the amount of points. Like, he is proven he can be an impactful player for this team at various different degrees. What does a 3-3 road trip say to you about this team? Should it happen, they have another game to win, and they need to. They're better than the Detroit Pistons. They need to beat the Detroit Pistons. But what would a 3-3 road trip tell you about this Sacramento Kings team?
I think it's monumental given the context. Like, going into the road trip, I said the goal should absolutely be 3-3, and an ideal scenario would be 4-2. I thought 5-1 and 6-0. Of course, that would be fantastic, but we're talking like best case scenario at that point, and you have to play near perfect. Like, and it's not just a road trip. It's not just 6 games on the road. It's 6 games where you're gone from home for over 2 weeks. You're in the East Coast in December. Like, it's a complete. You're jumping around from market to market. A lot of distractions out there as well. Like, these road trips are nothing to roll your eyes at. Like, these are significant no matter how much luxury they're traveling in or what 5-star hotel they're staying in, right? So for me, given the context of you're 1-2 to start the road trip, and then you're down 16 in Toronto. You come back and win that game, and then you handle your business in one of the games that you should handle your business, hopefully, in Detroit. Absolutely, the expectation is they should win that game. And Kings of old would go into that game maybe with a little bit of a swagger, or this, look at us, here we are, we're way better than this team, and we don't have to give our all. And look, the Detroit Pistons are a team where they have enough talent to where they can explode on you on any given night. Hell, we saw the Kings do that to other teams when they were a bad team last season. Suddenly they rattle off 130, 140 points.
Detroit had 140 last night.
Yeah, Killian Hayes played super well last night. Not to mention Cade Cunningham, Marvin Bagley, if he's capable of playing more than 10 minutes without hurting himself. Like,
yeah, that was called for. Because it appears that he's not. And I hope he gets healthy, but he did get hurt last night.
Sadiq Bey, like, there's so much talent in Detroit that you can't take lightly, but you absolutely should beat. And if you're able to do that, rattle off a 3-3 road trip, come home, and then you're staring at 6 straight at home where you've had a lot of success against teams that are good, but teams that are also beatable. Like that, to me, that
context. That's the thing. Charlotte's not good. No. And that's the difficulty. That, like, you got Detroit and Charlotte coming up. Those teams are not those I think are the 2 worst teams in the league, not just 2 of the worst teams. I think those are the 2 worst teams in the league, and those are your next 2 opponents. You got the Los Angeles Lakers coming in. I really don't know what you get from the Lakers on a night-to-night basis. There's obviously an extreme level of talent there, but you just don't know how it all gets put together on a night-to-night basis. And the Wizards, they had kind of hovered around that 500 mark, and they're starting to sink. A lot of people had looked to, and us included, at this 6-game road trip, how potentially season defining it is. Man, Matt, this next month at home might be the season defining moment. Like, how real is this, coming up? Like, can you reel off 3-4 wins against teams that you are significantly better than?
First off, shout out to the Chatty House. I forgot that Cade was out for the season. Completely spaced my mind. Yeah, number 2, sorry, I don't watch Detroit Pistons basketball. Number 2 is just like we were talking about with the Beam getting their attention, and the Beam's kind of the fun story, but now you need to pay attention to the players. Like, this is the real opportunity for the Kings to go, okay, you're paying attention to us a little bit. Now we're going to keep your attention. Now, okay, you're listening, you're watching. Now watch this. Like, that's what I look at this next stretch. Like, I look end of December through most of January. This is a potential for, I think, this Kings team to make a believer out of a lot of people, and many of whom are Sacramento Kings fans who are just still a little bit skeptical. Why? Because it's the Sacramento Kings. Like, this is your opportunity to kind of get rid of that, brush that under the rug a little bit, cement your 2 all-star candidates in Domantas Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox. Hell, maybe make it a runaway for Malik Monk winning 6th man of the year. Whatever it is, like, this is your opportunity to really separate yourself. And what I think is even more important than that, D-Lo, is building yourself a safety net that I think you're going to need in the Western Conference, or at least a little bit of wiggle room in the Western Conference, that when you get to the grinded out months of February and March and early April, especially if the West continues to be as tight as it is, there are some veteran teams and some veteran programs who are going to recognize, okay, seeding is everything and it's winning time. And 1 or 2 games could be the difference. 1 or 2 wins can be the difference during that time between you being a play-in team and you being a legitimate playoff team, like a 6th or 5th seed. So that's what this stretch, this opportunity presents the Sacramento Kings, is getting your work done ahead of time, taking advantage of playing at home, and also keeping the attention that you have earned on you.
I love it. If you haven't added Locked On Kings to your podcast listening habits, you're missing out. It's a fantastic podcast. It's fantastic work from our man, Matt George. Of course, you can check him out on ABC 10.